Hey guys, this is Anne from Asian 135 Spring 2025, and today I'm at my local Vietnamese supermarket with my aunt to cook up some pho for our family. First we have some bean sprouts, then some basil, some ngò gai or culantro, some green onions, and some ginger. Despite its international fame, the origins of pho are still pretty obscure. Some people believe that pho was created in the 1800s after the French colonists came, and that pho was made from the cuts of beef that the colonists didn't like to cook with. Some believe that pho evolved from dishes like Mongolian hot pot or Chinese goat meat noodle soup. Others believe that pho was created in the early 1900s as a way to use up leftover meat from Tết or Vietnamese Lunar New Year. Lastly, we have some pork bone, some beef shank, some beef meatballs, and pho noodle. First up, we're going to wash our pork bones. My aunt and I already washed the bones in vinegar, and now we're going to wash them in boiling hot water. According to my aunt, a good pho broth is clear as water, and in order to get that clarity, we need to wash the bones thoroughly. Ordinarily, my aunt would use beef bone to make pho bao or beef pho. However, the supermarket was out of beef bone, and so we're using pork bone instead. While some people might agree that using pork bone is fine, there are many who believe that real, authentic pho must be made entirely from beef. In her article on pho, food writer and restaurant critic Alexandra Greeley quotes numerous Vietnamese food critics who firmly believe that real pho is made from beef. For example, Greeley cites food scholar, cookbook author, and restaurant chef and owner Leon Yeomans, who asserts that the purest form of pho calls for rare beef, fish sauce, lemon juice, fresh chilies, sliced onions, and mint for seasoning. In other words, using alternatives such as chicken or pork would make the pho less pure. So would adding toppings such as bean sprouts, Thai basil, and culantro, according to Yeomans. Now that we're done washing the pork bones, we're going to transfer them over to a large pot so that we can start making the broth. First, we're going to set the stove to medium heat, then fill the pot up with water about halfway. Next, we're going to toss in some peeled white onions for flavor. We're also going to pound up some peeled ginger to throw into the pot. Then we're going to add a chunk of nuông phan, or rock sugar. Now we're going to add the rest of the water, then toss in our beef shank. Ordinarily, we'd have to let the broth sit over medium heat for at least 10 hours to make broth from beef bone, but since we're using pork bone, we only need to do that for about 4 hours. According to Greeley, pho lovers agree that the best pho has pale amber broth that's been skimmed of fat and blood and is clear as water. As for the meat and bones, the bones must add the right amount of sweetness, and the beef must be fresh and of top quality. Alright, so we've let our broth sit on medium heat for about 4 hours, and now we're going to add some cinnamon sticks and star anise. Then we're going to let the broth cook for another 5 minutes or so, and it'll be ready to serve. So now I've got my bowl of pho noodles, and I've put in some cooked beef shank, beef meatballs, and thịt thai, or slices of raw beef. I'm also going to put in some freshly grounded black pepper, and some shredded green onions. My favorite way to eat pho bao, or pho with beef, has always been with a generous topping of sliced raw beef. However, raw beef may not be the safest option in some contexts. According to an assessment of food safety of takeout pho in Vietnamese restaurants, takeout pho poses a significant food safety concern when the raw beef and broth are packaged separately. That is, if the raw beef isn't cooked by the broth right away, then there's a risk that pathogens like E. coli can survive and cause food poisoning. Now I'm going to season my bowl of pho to taste. First, I'm adding some chilies, then adding some lemon juice and fish sauce, then tossing in some fresh bean sprouts, then some fresh culantro and basil leaves. I'm also going to make myself a side of vinegared white onion. Some people like to put their vinegared onion directly into their broth, but I prefer to keep it on the side and mix in some sriracha. Now I'm going to make my dipping sauce for the beef. I'll add some sriracha, then some hoisin sauce. Lastly, I'm going to mix my dipping sauce, my vinegared onions, then my bowl of pho. For many Vietnamese living away from home, pho reminds them of their identity. In his research study conducted at the University of Alberta, Du Thiện Trân examines the relationship between pho and the Vietnamese national identity in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada. Trân concludes that, in the state of dislocation, Vietnamese immigrants continue to search for a taste of nostalgia, a type of nostalgic consumption, which makes Vietnameseness remain. And that taste of nostalgia can be found in pho. In another study conducted by Mandy Thomas at Australian National University, Thomas states that, for Vietnamese people living in Australia, Vietnam is often remembered nostalgically as a place of sensory pleasure, and that homesickness is often expressed as a longing to taste certain foods. As a result, as Thomas states, pho is sometimes viewed as the sensory essence of life in Vietnam. That's it for this video. I hope you all learned another thing or two about pho. If you ever do decide to visit Vietnam though, I highly recommend trying pho from not only the north, but also from the central and southern regions. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you go get some pho with your friends soon.